Good morning, student. Once again, you are most welcome in the online class of the 12th standard and the remaining part of the poem Father Returning Home, composed by the poet Dilip Chitre. As we know, in the first stanza of the poem, how father face the problems in a office. In the second stanza, poet is returned from office to home. Home again, I see him drinking weak tea, eating a stale chapati, reading a book. He goes into the toilet to contemplate man's estrangement from a man-made world. Coming out, he trembles at the sink, the cold water running over his brown hands. A few droplets cling to the graying hair on his wrists. His sullen children have often refused to share jokes and secret with him. He will now go to sleep, listening to the static on the radio, dreaming of his ancestor and grandchildren, thinking of nomads entering a subcontinent through a narrow pass. Before going to explain the poem, let us see the difficult word of the poem. Stale means not fresh. Estrangement means conflict. Trembles, not a clear voice. Static means stable, not moving. Ancestor, our forefather. Nomads means who travel through the desert. And sullen means bad tempered. Let us see the detailed explanation of the poem line by line. Home again, I see him drinking weak tea. Home again means father returning to the home. The same situation is there. When the father came to home, he get a weak tea, means not a hot tea, cold tea. Eating a stale chapati. Stale chapati means not a fresh, because father come too late at the home. After traveling a long time, father came at the home at the maybe midnight. That's why he doesn't get his hot tea or fresh chapati. Reading a book. He spent his time in reading a book. He goes into the toilet to contemplate. He wants to spend his loneliness. He goes into the toilet to contemplate man's estrangement from a man-made world. Estrangement means alienation. Man's estrangement from a man-made world. Coming out, he trembles at the sink when father returns to the home, and he goes to the toilet, and when he become fresh after coming out from the toilet, when he wash his hand, coming out he trembles at the sink, and at the sink he trembles. The cold water running over his brown hands. A few droplets cling to the graying hairs on his wrists. This line tells us that the father is aged person, because graying hairs on his wrists. it tells us that the father is aged person. His sullen children have often refused to share jokes and secrets with him. His sullen children means bad tempered. His children are also not interested to share their happiness with their father. They don't want to tell any jokes, or they doesn't want to listen any story from the father, or they don't disclose the secret with his father. It may be that the father is strict person in a home, that's why they may not be interested to share with him. He will now go to sleep. Now this is the time to go to sleep. Listening to the static on the radio, and his work stable on listening the radio song. At the night, dreaming of his ancestors and grandchildren, thinking of nomads entering a subcontinent through a narrow pass. And poet here explain the opinion of the father, because the ancestor who came from the desert, or we can say that they came from the village, and most of the poem of Dilip Chitre it depict, or it compare the village life as well as the life of suburban. In this poem also, poet explain the troubles which is faced by the suburban people through his father. Let us see the figures of speech of the poem. The first line of second stanza, home again, I see him drinking weak tea. In this line, letter H is repeated. If the letter is repeated more than 2 times, it can be said that it is an alliteration. Now, this poem is filled with the alliteration. You have to find out the remaining example of alliteration. Let us see the second figure of speech, onomatopoeia. Onomatopoeia is the figure of speech, the naming of a thing or of action by a vocal imitation of the sound associated with it. If there is any sound which is created in the line, in that situation we can say that this is onomatopoeia. Let us see an example of onomatopoeia from the poem. Listening to the static on the radio. Listening radio means radio create the sound in the form of songs or various type of programs, and in this situation we can say that this is an onomatopoeia. After learning this poem, one thing is clear, that here father of poet faced lots of hurdles, problem. Then which type of problems he has come through this poem, you have to write down. Sketch the character of the father with the help of following points from the poem. This poem is filled with the pathos or the bad condition of the father, which he is facing in the poem, in the first part of the poem as well as in the second part of the poem. So you have to write the pathetic condition of the father of the poem. Next, the treatment he receives at home, his solitude, we can say that isolation, his isolation, the way he tries to overcome. And this homework will help you to write down an appreciation while writing appreciation of the poem. Okay, thank you friends. We shall learn the remaining questions of the poem in the next time.